The middle class was once a symbol of the American dream. But the American middle class today paints quite a different picture.
Being
Oh,
middle
wow.
class, I feel like you're really just in between a rock and a hard place. You're in a spot where everyone's like, hey, you're doing better than, low class. You're doing great. You should be fine.
Dude, that is when they compare you to other people, and that somehow makes everything okay. Like, hey, at least you're not homeless. At least you're not super poor. At least you're not on welfare. I'm like, dude.
And you're underneath the people who are actually doing fine.
It was at least a secure category. Your kids would go to a school that you felt at least okay about. You probably own a car or two, and you'd own your own home, and you could pay for your kids' college educations. So there were certain kinds of assumptions around being a middle-class person that have sort of shattered.
A survey in 2018 found that a third of middle-income adults don't have $400 to cover an unexpected expense.
How can you be middle class but not have $400? That doesn't make any sense. That doesn't make any sense at all. What?
In polls, when people are asked about being middle class, they frequently are less likely to say so, and more people now urge the pollsters to suggest that they're working class. So I think that many people who maybe in prior years would have thought of themselves as middle class now no longer think of themselves that way.
So when we think about economic status, we think about it as some static, state of the world, that you are either poor or not poor, you're middle class or you're not. But in fact, the reality is that many middle class families will experience one or a few years in poverty. In fact, most American families will have years where they'll be poor or near poor. That precarity, that uncertainty, that is now a feature of the middle class experience for most US families.
So, what exactly happened to the American middle class?
Kids don't play outside anymore. That's not a thing.
A study by the Pew Research Center discovered that the middle class, which was once comprised of the majority of Americans, has steadily shrunk since the 1970s. About 61% of American adults were considered middle class in 1971, compared to just 51% in 2019. However, the issue still remains widely debated.
When people think about the state of the middle class and whether or not it's shrinking, it really is a difficult question. And I think the reason why is that as a nation, we've not actually established a formal definition of middle class.
I was at a seminar recently where somebody literally said, there is no middle class anymore. The middle class is gone. And I thought, oh dear, that's political rhetoric. And I understand that it's a sort of a stand-in for saying that folks in the middle are hurting, but it's just really not accurate. We looked at the size of the middle class in these 16 rich countries in 1985 and again in 2016. And one of the things that surprised me was the size of the middle class in the United States did not change. It was about 59% in 1985, and it was 59% in 2016.
Yeah, but the boundaries are not defined. So how can you even say how can these numbers come from anything? What's the definition of middle class?
Experts instead prefer the term squeezed to describe what's happening to the middle class today.
Even if the middle class hasn't statistically shrunk, I do think that the middle class faces more in the way of pressures to maintain or even build upon their position.
What it takes to actually live a middle class life, to have quality of life, in many American cities is not what it once was. They're not necessarily able to pay their rent easily. They can't own a property. If they're in their 30s, they may not feel comfortable having kids because they'll realize that having a child would be too expensive. And forget about medical care. If you have one thing happens to you physically, often people don't have good enough medical care. They don't have any insurance. This all goes into making somebody part of the squeezed middle class.
As the middle class lifestyle grows more expensive and uncertain, it's also moving farther beyond the reach of younger generations. In 2019, just 60% of millennials were part of middle-income households in their 20s, compared with almost 70% of baby boomers. Meet Chantel Jacob. Chantel lives in suburban Texas with her husband and one child. And while a household income of just over $100,000 should put her family in the middle income tier, She says that her family is still struggling toward financial stability.
Sounds great, 6 figures, but once
Wait, what? Middle income tier in 2020 between 53,000 and 160,000. This is a big difference. I feel like someone making $53,000 is living a lot differently than someone that's making $160,000. But I guess it also depends where you live, I guess. But yeah, you have to be like really living in somewhere no one wants to live to like justify this being middle class. I think another issue is like, yeah, we need to like account for like the area, like the housing costs in the area and stuff, and how expensive the area is. And yeah, we just need better definitions all around because I think what really matters is not how much you make, it's how much purchasing power you have. It's like if you make $160,000 but you live in a super expensive area, you have to like spend 70% of your income on rent, then your purchasing power is really small. Versus if you make $53,000 and you have the house paid off, then you actually have like way more purchasing power than the person that makes this much money. So I think the definitions are really bad. That the how we classify what middle class is. I think we can do better. We can do better.
Financial stability.
sounds great, 6 figures. But once we got married, the taxes that come out of my check before I even get any money, before all of my benefits, $500 come out of my check automatically. And then you add in insurance, life insurance for my spouse, myself, and my son. And I also have money going aside for my son's college fund. It's not a lot because I can't do that much, but I want to have something for him. You know, my check that starts off at about $3,000 goes down to $2,200 before I even get to touch it. Our rent's about $1,700. Electricity is about $150. Phone bill's about $280. Internet $60. We both have vehicles. Those are about $800. Insurance on those vehicles is about $400. On food, $400 to $500 a month, but that's increasing. We budget down to the dollar, and sometimes it's very disheartening to work all week and have people tell you like, oh, you're so lucky, you have a great job, and then you're like, I don't know about that.
There are several reasons why the middle class is feeling squeezed. Between 1970 and 2018, the middle class share of aggregate income fell by 19% in the US. In comparison, the share of aggregate income for upper income households saw a rise of 19%. Another study by the Brookings Institute found that income in the middle class has grown half as fast compared to both the bottom 20% and the top 20% of income tiers.
Oh, wow.
Once taxes and transfers
So it's like the middle class is disappearing. Because the lower class is making a lot more money, but the middle class isn't.
were taken into account.
If I stay at a company for a while, my income becomes stagnant. You know, it increases by a couple thousand. I generally have to job hop to have increases in my income, which in itself is not security.
Middle class workers over the last 40 years have not been able to adequately benefit from the productivity growth, the expansion of the pie in the economy. We've measured this and found that the typical worker has fallen 43 percentage points behind the growth of productivity. What that means is that the middle class worker could have earned 1 percentage point more per year in compensation growth over the last 40 years. And they didn't get it because there was an erosion of labor's share of overall income and because of rising inequalities such that the top 10%, particularly the top 1%, and even more so the top 0.1%, took in much of the gains from the growth of the economy.
While incomes stagnate, the cost of living has risen dramatically over the years. To put it into perspective, the average household income in the US saw just a 16% increase over the last 50 years.
What? That's not true.
In comparison, Housing costs increased by 190%, and college tuition shot up by nearly 264% in the same time period.
I first moved in over here in these apartments I live in 5 years ago. My rent was like $1,100. It's now $1,700. That $600 increase happened. I did not have a $600 increase. Like, my income did not increase at the same rate.
Rising
If we look at the chart, yeah, housing got way more expensive. College got way more expensive, but college doesn't really matter. I mean, like, you don't have to go. I mean, I guess you might have to go to college. Yeah, you kind of need to go to college if you don't need to, but you have to do something creative if you want to get a job without going to college, which is possible. But anyways, yeah, I think the real issue is the housing cost in proportion to how much the average household income is. And I think there's a couple of reasons for that. I think one of the reasons is that there's just more people in the United States, and there's not as much infrastructure. There's a lot. The infrastructure is not there, and for some reason, I don't know why, but we're not building any infrastructure in the United States. Or if we are, it's really slow. If you go to somewhere like Japan, they're building all kinds of stuff everywhere. Like in the middle of Tokyo, they're adding. If you thought Tokyo was jam-packed with buildings, they somehow figure out how to add more buildings to accommodate the humongous dense population. But we don't do any of that in the United States. We don't build anything. I think it has to do because of a lot of laws make it really hard, and the people who owned the land aren't building anything or something. But yeah, I think there's just not enough incentive for companies or people to build stuff in the United States, or if it's just too expensive. And the government is definitely not helping out. They can't even build like a decent train system in the cities. So to me, that kind of blows my mind. Like, the government has the biggest government budget in the out of all the countries in the world, the US has the biggest government budget probably by far. I don't know. They get a lot of money, yet we can't get like these basic things figured out in the government. And I am lost. And I think like part of it is like, I think the auto manufacturing company doesn't want us to build public transportation, but that's a whole different story. The main issue is that housing got really expensive, and we're not building new stuff in the US for some reason. So now everything's super expensive, and we're in a situation that's like, you either have a house already or you inherited a house. You basically have to inherit a house, or you are really smart and you manage to make a lot of money on your own, which is really not the case for most people. I'm talking like you have to be at least like the top 10% or something like that who can actually like make a whole bunch of money and buy the house on their own comfortably. But for the most part, it's like you have to inherit a house. You just have to wait. You have to wait for your parents to die, basically. If you are lucky enough that they have a house, then you can at some point inherit that house. And yeah, and because of this, there is like people are stuffing each other in that single house. They are sharing really small spaces. There's homelessness is an issue. It's rough. It's like when I was like a teenager, like older teenagers would move out the house when they're 18 years old, which I thought was normal. And then I became 18 years old, and I'm like, yo, that's not That's not a thing anymore. You can't just go live in your own place when you turn 18. Unless you have like a really good job or something somehow, but you are mostly living with your parents.
Time period.
I first moved in over here in these apartments I live in 5 years ago. My rent was like $1,100. It's now $1,700. That $600 increase happened. I did not have a $600 increase. Like, my income did not increase at the same rate.
Rising expenditures, rising prices in health, housing, and education are very real, and they've put a tremendous amount of pressure on income, so on households in the middle whose income simply doesn't go as far as it used to.
The situation is even worse in cities where the cost of living is already higher. An analysis in 2018 found that raising a family and a middle-class lifestyle in expensive coastal cities like San Francisco or New York needs an income of at least $300,000 a year. For reference, just 10% of all households made
$300,000 a year. What the heck?
$200,000 or over in 2020.
I recently saw an apartment next to the building I work in Plano, and I was like, it'd be great to walk across the street to work. And it was like $2,400 for an efficiency. And I'm like, that's insane. And then it's like, for what I have, they call a townhome, 3-bed, 2-bath, $5,500. I'm like, well, absolutely not. Like, I'm gonna pay $5,500 and I don't own it. It's not mine. It's just getting worse. And everyone, it's like, I feel like native people are being pushed out into the suburbs, and then people from out of state can come in and enjoy the beautiful fruits of Dallas and have fun and be close to the restaurants. And, you know, I have to live out here, and, you know, it's not bad, but it's not Dallas. I'm from Dallas. I grew up there. That's where I want to be. But how it is now, you know, it's just not affordable.
Policymaking might be both the fault and the solution of the middle class squeeze.
There is no help whatsoever. There's no policy in place to assist people. And I feel like as soon as you get a job or as soon as you're working, they're just like, oh, that's all you need is a job. You got it, you know, go forth and have at it.
The stagnation of wages and paychecks for people started in the 70s when productivity started growing more slowly, but really accelerated after 1979 and 80 when there was a huge growth of inequality, when the top 1% took off, when the stock market grew, but people's paychecks didn't. And that has to do with issues of deregulation and excessive unemployment, the weakening of unions, the failure to raise the minimum wage, globalization with low-wage countries that really put the kibosh on blue-collar job opportunities in many places. The point is that it's not that the economy got worse, it was that there were policy decisions made so that the economic growth did not filter down to the vast majority.
The country wasn't built by Wall Street bankers, CEOs, and hedge fund managers. It was built by you. It was built by the great American middle class.
In response, the Biden administration came into office in 2021 with a promise to revitalize the middle class. The $1 trillion bipartisan infrastructure bill from November 2021 and the upcoming Build Back Better Act both include provisions aimed at financially supporting middle-income families. But as Congress continues to find itself in stalemate, only time will tell whether these bills would really have an impact on the survival of middle-income households.
I don't see any change effects. My friends that were struggling are still struggling. You know, I'm still budgeting down to every dollar, trying to get things done. So I just feel like if the changes are happening, they're not trickling down fast enough for us to see the effects of it.
I think that overall, the team with the Biden administration.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think that the point that there is the huge economic growth that is happening in the United States is really, really not seen by the middle class or even the poor class. Yeah, all the economic growth is not going to the vast majority of people. Like most of the people are not seeing the economic growth that's happening. It's really just the people at the top, the 1%.
Done quite well. At the same time, they're up against really strong headwinds. We're talking about
middle class is gone, brother. Couldn't have said it better myself.
A global pandemic that persists. We're talking about historic levels of inflation and labor shortages that are leading to these sorts of supply chain gaps worldwide. So I think that both things are true. they've done a good job, but they also have a lot of work to do.
The fate of the middle class could determine the future of the American dream.
I think like the most important thing that you can have in the country is a strong middle class, because if you have people that are willing or striving to become middle class, I think that is like the greatest thing your economy can have, because you have people who are incentivized to work and build a career. If your middle class is struggling really hard, then a lot of people are just going to be like, why bother put in any effort if I'm not going to be able to afford anything anyway? And then if I can just live on welfare and I won't have to work and I can just do the same stuff. So like, what is the point? And it's crazy to me that people don't see it that way.
I think we do need to be concerned, because this has an effect on how people perceive the American experiment working for them. And there are expectations that there should be this upward growth and mobility. But I think we do have an increasingly precarious labor market for many Americans. And so it's important to note that this is also a feature of inequality.
It's a shame.
Put 5% down on a 768,000 house below the median. I mean, yeah, that's cheap in the Bay Area. That'd be, what a deal. And see how much it takes to qualify, then separate your company's script stock from a real dollar, subtract the cost of insurance and 401k, and try to survive. LOL. Dude, yeah, I mean, it's crazy how much of your income has to go to housing. That is the crazy thing. That is the crazy thing. I think like back in the day, you only paid like 20% of your income on housing. And now you're paying like upwards of like 50-60% of all the money you make is straight up going to your rent or your mortgage. Some people even go higher than that. They're crazy. They basically, all their money goes to their mortgage and they are barely surviving on everything else.
That we have as much or more poverty now than we did 40 years ago, that the middle class is earning somewhat higher wages, but not in proportion to what they've increased their productivity over that time. And what this does is it adds to division. It hurts our democracy. It hurts our the upward mobility of the children of these families.
That whole middle class of people is like teetering on the brink of ruin. One emergency, one catastrophe, and you can see even COVID showed you how quickly people who were doing good can just fall off and have nothing. That should have been a wake-up call that we need to change some things.
Yep, well, there's that. Well, I can't wait until 10 years they'll be shit talking us and how we handle these situations. And 10 years are gonna be like, oh wow, you can afford air? Dang. So, and if you rented the equivalent, it would be 3 to 4K or so for rent. Yeah, that sounds right. So if you make 150 to 170K, you can't qualify for the house, but you also have to pay essentially the same amount just in rent. It's just dumb. Yeah, that is stupid. Yeah, I mean, like, yeah. You could be building equity, but you have to rent. The whole system needs to be tear it down. I don't know. They should build more houses. They should build more infrastructure or something to make it more affordable. And also, we got to stop BlackRock from buying all these houses. What are we doing, guys? Why are we letting these big mega corporations buy housing? That can't be right. That can't be the right. That doesn't sound. That should be a thing. I don't know how they'll even fix it because inflation is no joke too. That's true. That is true. Okay, well, let me show you guys something. Actually, this is kind of super interesting. A home for sale in the U.S. in the 1960s. $7,450. $7,450, monthly payments of $47. Nice. Nice. Okay. But let's look at the average income in the 1960s. So let's look at how much people made. So we'll look at income, families, and persons in the United States in 1960. Perfect. Okay. So for the country as a whole, the average income of families in the 1960s was $5,600. But for families headed by a person 65 years and over, the average was only $2,900. Oh, that was it. They had an interesting issue back then. If you were older, you were actually making a lot less money. Yeah, that's not. I don't think that's not happening right now. But the average income was $5,600, and the price of a house, $7,450. So basically, your salary was like 85% of what the total house costs. Versus now, you make you would have to make like, that's like the equivalent of making $800,000 a year today. Or something like that. So like back then, it's like they were making like at least like $500,000 in today's money. If you compare it in proportion to like how much you can afford a house. And I think that's a good measurement because like most of your money does go into housing. So this should be like the most important metric you use to figure out how much purchasing power a person has in different time periods in the United States. Well, we got to do something. I don't want to say it is what it is because that just sounds like we're defeated, but we'll figure something out. With the help, if everyone comes together, we can figure something out, hopefully. But anyways, yeah, I'm gonna wrap up the stream here. Thanks for coming, Asmir Balding, middle-aged. See you guys around. See you later, FamJurg. See you guys around. Like, subscribe, or something. I don't know. I don't care anymore. Screw it.